that kind of reality, I think, on the job was you can't save everybody, as we were saying earlier, and that you think, what did I miss? What did I miss? That you could beat yourself up forever over that. And I know it has. It really bothers a lot of therapists of, I should have known. I should have known. I'm thinking, but if we're asking the questions and we're creating the space and we're not giving the answer, we're not psychic. We can't pull it out of somebody if they don't want to tell it to us. So how would we know any more than anyone else would?
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. So you move on and you go to college. Where did you go to college?
I went to college in New Hampshire, at the University of New Hampshire, and then I went to grad school at Fordham. But I just want to tell you that I recently read an article which it really resonated. Author's name is Katie Vernoy, an LMFT, marriage and family therapist, who was talking about something that I hadn't heard of before, that therapists get: sacrificial helping syndrome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chew on that for a minute, right?
Yeah.
My client needs me. My client needs me. My clients need me. Whatever. To the extent where sometimes the self-neglect takes the front seat over that. You know, it's
I find that
crazy.
with my family. So I do. I find that with my family, but I'm conscious enough about it where I pause, and I say, okay, this has to wait. I have to go here now. Like I know that because I did that too much in my police career. It was job. Everything was about the job. And when I retired, I said to myself, I said, that's not going to happen anymore. But it did. It did.
Yeah.
You know, because it's an addiction. Helping people is an addiction.
It is. When you actually see people having that progress and the success, I can't even the feeling of when somebody talks about them feeling good finally is incredible.
It's
Because this going back to the suffering part, right? People don't go to therapy because things are okay.
when in reality, if they did, or they just, things just, they need a tune up, God, what an easier job that would be, huh?
Yeah, enormously. Enormously. If people went to like a mental gym the way they go to the gym to work out, or physical therapy if you've injured yourself to heal, if we treated our minds the same way, it'd be very different.
Because we don't think we need it until we need it.
Or we need it so bad it's scary.
Now, was there a moment in the University of New Hampshire? Well, what did you study there? What was your major?
Well, I did double major. I did social work and justice studies.
Of course you did, because you're an overachiever. That's just all. That's the way it is.
Well, I thought I was going to do law school at the time too. I thought I was then going to do the graduate double master's of social work JD. I pulled that application at the interview day and said, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to practice law. I want to be a therapist.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing. I took my LSATs because I was told that go be a lawyer. You should be a lawyer. Took my LSATs and I found and I passed my LSATs. I didn't really study all that much, but I found nothing in there for me, and I'm very grateful. So I'm 50 years old, and there's a lot of people in my situation that went to law school and they got out and they have all this money in student loan debt, and they're making $50,000-$60,000 because the market was flooded with lawyers. So unfortunately, it's good sometimes to see which way everybody's running and run the other way. But when did you start developing a love for helping people?
I think it probably still started as I was a kid. Knowing what my mom was doing and reading all those journals and having all that time. The other thing was when Mom went back to work, the library was kind of the babysitter for the after school, do your homework, get picked up. But when your homework was done in a few minutes, you just started reading things that were on the shelf. So, right, being a sponge, learning as much as I could, I had a couple of scary situations with kids that were my peers. A friend who I showed up and was rolling up on the bike in the driveway to see if she wanted to hang out, and she's in the garage huffing a gas can.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what? Call in the adults. Her family moved away within 30 days. Never knew what happened to her.
Now, did you ever have one of your friends approach you with a secret? Because we're here to talk about the suffering of secrets.
Well, that's kind of a secret, right? Don't call anybody. Like, please don't tell my parents. And I'm like, oh no, I am. This is not okay, right?
So when is a secret a secret and when is a secret not a secret? Like that particular incident where there's harm, there's
Right.
potential for harm, obviously is not a secret.
Right.
But is there a clear delineated line, or is it opinion based?
I think it's hard for individuals to make those kind of calls because it's a dilemma for a therapist, right? We have confidentiality rules. We have patient privilege, right, that we have to uphold by keeping that confidence. But there are exceptions. And every therapist is supposed to describe those, pretty much thoroughly discuss them at the beginning of the relationship because the exceptions are self-harm, harm to others, the duty to warn someone else,
Well,
or child abuse.
we see it in the police world. So there's an organization that's been around forever. It's a peer support
Mhm.
type of thing. And I called it. I'm the one who called this place very early on in my crisis. I've heard that this place is no longer really trustworthy. Now, one of the places that I know is definitely trustworthy is an organization called Copline. Because I know the person who started Copline. I also know the person who started the other organization as well. Happens to be the same person, but she left for a very good reason. Now, with police, this is why I wanted to get into this topic. There's secrets, and then there's secrets. So with police, when we just have a bad day and we call these helplines, well, we don't. The last thing we want is our department to be notified. And unless there's a potential for harm to another person, it's mostly just a bad day. All right. And the worst thing you could have on a bad day is everlasting consequences.
Right.
So that,
Right.
listen, if I come and I call this place and say, hey, I want to hurt myself, but I'm having a bad day. Okay. To notify my department, you just made a bad problem all that much worse. But at the same time, the person on the other end of the phone doesn't want you to hurt yourself.
Right.
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com. You know?
It's a rock hard place situation always with that. And I think if you have lost people, right, that's the other part of it. I had the first friend I lost to a suicide was high school. Second was in college. So
And what year are you talking about with the high school?
Early 80s, college, later 80s.
Yeah.
And, you kind of, at the time when it's a first experience, you kind of like, whoa, kind of a little bit of a mind-blowing situation. Like, who would have ever imagined it?
It's always the last person like that. They'll never do it. They'll never do it. And they do it.
And it's out of the blue. And then early in my career, I want to say within the first maybe 6, 7, 8 years, the first job I had to notify some of the kids who were in my group home if they had family members who had overdosed or taken their lives. Being the notifier was tough. Then there was on the job working in rehabs. There were people who overdosed. You were going to have clients who didn't make it. And that kind of reality, I think, on the job was you can't save everybody, as we were saying earlier, and that you think, what did I miss? What did I miss? That you could beat yourself up forever over that. And I know it really bothers a lot of therapists of, I should have known. I'm thinking, But if we're asking the questions and we're creating the space and we're not giving the answer, we're not psychic. We can't pull it out of somebody if they don't want to tell it to us. So how would we know any more than anyone else would?
So
Right? It's no magic wand involved with like reading through something. It's
the best. I just heard a skit on this one. A comedian named Nate Bargatze. He starts talking about the sixth sense.
mm,
So he gets shot. Bruce Willis gets shot, and you go through the whole movie until you watch the end and you find out that he's dead. But you just think, which is more believable than him being dead,
Yeah.
that his wife's not talking to him, because those are people with wives not talking to them. You sort of get it. You're like, oh, I know what he's going through. But that's the therapists who are, because therapists are the most, they're the front line when it comes to any type of mental health crisis. You know, that's where you go to first, because it's the most non-confrontational, it's the most non-consequential. And so they sort of just let everything go. And you sit there and you have to decipher all this stuff. What do I pick out? where do I go with all this stuff? What do I tell? Do I tell anything? Do I keep that secret? The mind, excuse my language, the mind fuck of all this stuff is crazy. So let's back up.
well, that line of, is this person able to stay with you as the therapist on that, or do you need reinforcements?
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what it comes down to, because at a certain point, it may not be manageable by a single therapist, which is where that team comes in a hospital setting.
Well, once you get your license, once you become a licensed social worker, a licensed therapist, once you get that license, I'm sure you are in a different situation because you had real world experience. You watch your mother do all this stuff. So I'm sure you had more knowledge than the average person who didn't come from this background. But I'm sure there was some culture shock when you first got your first job, and because you wanted to go out there and I'm going to make a difference, I'm going to save the world, and things didn't quite work out. Did you have that experience when you first took that job?
I did. The first job I took was before I got the master's. That was, let me work for a while and then go back. And I worked in a setting, group home setting, residential setting, where the youth had been removed from their homes in the 5 boroughs. And
seeing things that people can only, they really can't imagine.
I drove home sobbing, right, a couple of times, thinking, this is more than abuse. These children were tortured, you know, and that was before the Adoption and Safe Families Act, too. They would just like language in the system. So it was particularly like this, no school, no nothing can prepare you for the things that I saw and heard during those days. I had experience of being locked in a bodega and needing to, in Spanish, offer beers, please, beg, let me out, right? Because I was going on a home visit with a kid. I got shot at in Harlem trying to find some kid's mom to see if we could possibly get them out of the group home. And then I get chased by pit bulls on a 3rd floor walk up. Every time I'd go to see if there was a family member home, this other neighbor would let their dogs out. It's like, come on. I mean, after a while, when you're doing that for, at the time, $17,000 salary, you kind of go, this is not right.
Yeah.
You know, for anybody, this is not right.
The
I mean,
pay
there were officers at precincts that I'd go and I'd like, can we get an escort? They'd be like, we don't go there. Okay.
And you have to sit there and deal with all this stuff, and you have to deal with it unprotected. In reality, you're just trying to make a difference. You're trying to solve a problem that nobody else can seem to solve, or nobody really wants to solve. So some of these kids, and I've witnessed this firsthand. One of my first jobs, I was still in college. I worked at a juvenile detention center, and I saw kids who had done some bad things, but there's a reason why these kids have done some bad things.
What's the backstory?
There's a lot of backstory, and I was able to find out a lot of the backstory. And some of these kids, you can see the path that they're going to go on, because again, once they just don't have a chance. And you're sitting there and you're trying to make an impact, but you're trying to do it in a way where you're not coming in from an outsider. But nothing prepared you for this stuff, because from what you're saying, the way you grew up, this is not your experience. So you're coming in fresh.
But I'm also coming in, and I keep referencing my mom. I owe a lot of her setting example to that. The earliest traumatic incident that I witnessed, I was only about 3 or 4 years old, maybe 4.5. A car came flying off the New York State Thruway, airborne, crashed into trees, burst into flames, and bodies went flying. My mother looked at me. She said, "Stay in the car and pray." She grabbed a blanket and she went over and started throwing blankets on top of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's an image that never leaves your mind.
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
Exactly. So from that early age, what did I learn? Pray, help. I mean, in two simple words to a toddler, pray and help. Okay. Pretty much that was the setting of the course, I think.
Now,
From that day forward.
is your mother still with us?
She is.
She is.
She is.
She's got to be pretty proud of the life that you chose, following in the family footsteps. Did you ever go back and lean on your mom, say, "Hey, listen, I got some," because you're the keeper of secrets. You're the gatekeeper, and some things become too big for you to handle. Now you have this expert who is connected to you, who is your family.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go back to her and say, "Hey, can I pick your brain?"
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, especially in the early years, when I was first coming out of going through school, those first few jobs where I was like, "Wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be," and I was gaining a newfound kind of like, "Wow, you're doing some really hard things," right? I did a couple times. I said to her that the therapists go through that training of what we call clinical supervision, where the advanced mentor is really helping you process this stuff, because a lot of that stuff triggers your own personal issues. Learning how to manage it is so vital that I'd say to her, "There's not enough clinical supervision in the world to process some of the things that we see in here." And then she said, "I know. That's why we pray." And again, kind of bringing it back to, a spiritual base, right? I'm not gonna say everybody should have to believe in something. If you don't believe in a universal source of God of some fashion, believe in something outside yourself, right? Or believe in yourself. Believe in something. And that's kind of the whole bottom line of it is don't just do nothing,
Well,
right?
you look at every recovery base, program out there. It's
Mhm.
believe in a higher power, because there's power to it.
Oh, yeah.
There's power to it. It removes you from yourself, and it also makes you feel less alone in this, this big globe that we're on.
Mhm.
Now, that's pretty cool though that you had that anchor. At least you had somebody to go to. You're very fortunate with it, and that probably, if I had to theorize, it was a big key to your success. But then, how do you guard yourself? Because you touched on this. How do you guard yourself about becoming inundated with the negativity that you see? Because that's what you're seeing all day. You're seeing negativity. So how do you guard yourself against that?
Well, it's like going out in a rainstorm. You can put on the boots, you can put on the raincoat, you can carry the umbrella, but if it's raining hard enough, you're still going to get a little wet.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to accept that. And then, okay, I'm going to dry off. I am going to dry off. Rain is going to end. Kind of almost using another piece of a skill that therapists use called motivational enhancement therapy, right?
Explain that for me.
Keeping people focused on hope. Because without hope,
It's a lost cause.
it's kind of like that's the center of everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't wear my hope bling hat, but I have a baseball hat that has hope and bling on it that I keep up on my shelf where I'm sitting in my office, because there's got to be hope that you can make a change, that it doesn't have to be like this.
My favorite thing with hope is somebody once gave me an acronym for it. It's hold on, pain ends. And I hold to that. I hold to that very close to my heart, because it's 100% true. Like you said with the rain.
Mm-hmm.
The rain is eventually going to end. You're going to dry. It can't rain all the time, which is my favorite line from the movie The Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They sang that song, It can't rain all the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
say that a lot to people. I'm like, hey, it can't rain all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of truth to that. Do you ever have to go in for a tune-up with another social worker or therapist to sort of...
There's a few ways of looking at it, right? Yeah. I mean,
unleash.
so personal therapy, right, is something that any therapist will know at some point in their career, usually early on, very much encouraged. Some programs say you need to do it for at least a little bit, because if you're going to do this job and do this work, you really should know what it's like to be on the other side.
Bedside manner type
Absolutely.
of, yeah.
Especially in the beginning, everyone's encouraged, some are even required by their program. So yeah, I would go in and out of therapy when I was young, different periods of time. My father died when I was young, unsuspectingly. So there was a period of therapy after that. Period of therapy before I was coming out to the family. Definitely some periods of therapy with realizing that clients are going to die or take their lives. And there's not much I can do about it. So in those first, maybe let's say 10, 15 years of the career, where a lot of the realizations of the realities of the career are happening, ooh. And then, of course, if you have personal issues, personal therapy, right? If there's something going on in your own family,
Well,
absolutely you're encouraged to utilize the supports for that,
I
right?
think that's the biggest mistake people make about therapists, that they got it all together. Now, I have sat in front of some
Right.
bad therapists.
Oh, sure.
Not everybody's good.
Sure.
There are some great ones out there, and those great ones have saved my life. So I'm a huge fan of those people. But I have sat in front of bad therapists. They are detached.
Mhm.
There's no feeling to it.
Mhm.
They're there for a paycheck. They're watching the clock, and as soon as that clock hits 45, you're out.
Mhm.
And they'll leave you in pieces.
Mhm.
Have you ever had that opportunity to sit in front of somebody who you're like,
I had a colleague who was a dry analytic type like that, who would even take his wedding band off because he didn't want anyone to know he was married. Wouldn't put his diploma up because he didn't want anyone to know where he went to school.
what? Why?
It's too personal.
It's
It's
humanizing.
well, he was at one far end of the spectrum of his opinion of the therapist should be a blank slate to only do the work of the therapy with the client. And I was like, listen, if I know something from my personal life that didn't come out of a textbook that I can offer someone, I'm gonna.
Not to mention that really connects you to your client.
Well, relationship is what my first supervisor pointed out is probably the most important piece of every therapist to know. That you can go through, a series of therapists, and if you're not connecting with them, how are you supposed to get any work done? I myself did that. When my father died, they sent me to University Health Services. I went through every therapist in the building, and finally, the director said, "You're stuck with me. You need to make this work." Okay, if you don't click with the person, it's okay to say, you know what? I think I need to maybe work with someone else.
Because you're not built for everybody.
Right.
And I guarantee that you're not everybody's cup
No,
of tea.
absolutely not.
And that's okay. That's okay to do that. But you have to be a professional enough to say, hey, it's almost like you need
Yep.
to divorce your client. But that's now, how does your job affect your home life? Because you bring these things home, they weigh on you. And I don't care if you're the strongest person in the world, these things do affect you. But you have to guard against bringing some of this baggage home to your family. How do you do that?
do. Yeah. I tell the students, and I teach grad students, and I've taught undergrad as well, but I tell them all the time, you have to develop a routine that works for you. As soon as your routine is off, it's gonna be completely horrible. If you talk to runners, if they miss a day or two, they're like completely discombobulated. The same thing for me. The routine is in the morning. Before I'm even doing anything with clients, I'm making sure that I'm doing something for me. Because if I don't get to it later in the day, I took care of my self-care and my needs with that first.
Well, if you're
So
not
that's
okay, how are you going to help
correct.
anybody else?
So it's almost like the morning meditation, the morning setup for that whole where I'm going and how I'm going to handle it is really important.
Because you have to get your mind. Like I do that in the gym. Okay, the gym time, and even when my sons come with me, my sons will come with me to the gym. Even when my sons come with me, that is my focus time. I'm doing something for the betterment of me, because my day gets hectic, the day gets away from you, and if I don't take that moment consciously for myself every single day, the rest of my day is shot.
Mm-hmm.
So constantly, so that's something that's very important. So take a little bit of time in the morning for yourself always.
In the days of newspapers, I used to read the comics first.
You got to have a
Start
smile.
my day laughing because I may not laugh again before sunset, and I don't want to not laugh today, so start that way. Still, I'll do that. Now I do it with reading some stupid reel, scrolling someplace or something. Laugh at a meme or something.
Well, we have these wonderful tools at our fingertips that are misused.
Yes,
They are
yes.
100% misused. There's so much information out there, and we're looking at funny dog videos.
Absolutely.
Which,
Well, okay, puppies can be cute too.
well, I'm a dog person, so I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah,
I get it.
yeah.